Good evening. How are you, Eleanor? Happy to be back. So let us.
Want to comment?
Huh?
Do you want to comment?
Yeah. Let's commence. We could chant a little bit. Om Agyan Timarandasya Gananjana Salakaya Chakshurun Militam Jena Tasmai Sri Guruve Namah Sri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Namao Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Sri Mate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pastyatya Deshatarine Jayosi Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Rama Rama Hare Hare Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Welcome to our Bhagavad Gita session. We are currently on chapter 9 of Bhagavad Gita. And if you've joined fairly recently, please don't worry, because the way the class is structured is that many of the subject matters bleed into the other. So in other words, things that were discussed in the second chapter, or the third chapter, or the fourth chapter, so on, are continually discussed. Krishna, throughout the Gita, has these interwoven themes. So joining in the middle, or even at the end, or in the beginning, is kind of like biting into sugar cane. Have any of you ever bit into sugar cane? In India, there's sugar cane, and sometimes there's stands on the side of the road where you actually, they juice the sugar cane. But my point being is if you get a piece of sugar cane, if you bite at one end, it's sweet. If you bite at the other end, it's sweet. If you bite in the middle, it's sweet. So the Bhagavad Gita is structured that way by Madhuram Krishna. His teachings are sweet because they're meant for the conditioned souls, no matter where we come from, what culture we come from, what socioeconomic background we come from, what religion we adhere to. It doesn't matter. The teachings in Bhagavad Gita are universally applicable to all of us because Krishna deals with what is called Sanatan Dharma. What you do on a regular basis in this body is called Dharma. It's your occupation, it's your religion, it's your various responsibilities, etc. That's called Dharma. But Krishna doesn't deal with Dharma. He deals with what we know as Sanatan Dharma. And the word Sanatan means eternal. So Krishna is directly dealing with our duties and responsibilities and activities, which are our spiritual nature, based on our spiritual being, rather than just on our material, external body and mind. You have a body, you have a mind, you have an intellect and ego. All of these, body, mind, senses, intellect, ego, all of these are within what we appear as now. In other words, I'm male, Caucasian male, 73 years old, and all these different designations which make up the form that you see. But beyond that external appearance is the internal soul, which is the motivating and life force and consciousness giving force for all those things I mentioned: the body, the mind, the senses, the intellect, the ego. There is a life force coming from the jiva, or the soul, that is within each and every body. So Krishna is directly talking to that soul and that soul's responsibility above and beyond our material designation. So that means this knowledge that's contained in Gita applies to every entity that has a soul. So anything that demonstrates life, both animal, vegetable, human, they all contain souls because they demonstrate life. So the instructions of Gita, or for us and for our life and the life force directly, so Krishna is directly speaking to that. That is where the oneness exists between us all. The oneness exists is that we're eternal souls. Na tve baham jatu nasam, na twang name janadipa, na chaiva na bhavishyama, sarve vayam atakparam. Krishna says that in the second chapter. He says very clearly, what is his first instruction to Arjuna? Never was there a time when I, Krishna, did not exist, nor you, Arjuna, nor all these kings on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, nor any other soul, nor in the future shall we cease to be. When Krishna gets into instructing Arjuna, that's what he tells him. You're a soul, eternal by nature. And there's not a time where you cease to exist. So these instructions are universally applicable and can be understood as such if one is simply receptive, open to these instructions. It's like, I remember when I went to college, Excuse my voice, it's a little hoarse. I just came back from Camp Spark. It was a kids camp that I brought my son to, an eco farm in Gita Nagari, and that's in Port Royal, Pennsylvania. So I was quite active there, especially with my voice, chanting and giving instructions to kids and stuff like that. So my voice is a little hoarse right now. In any case, so this is the first instruction that Krishna gives to Arjuna. When Arjuna states that he is in despair, he's confused about his duty, quite like our situation. Which one of us can say that we don't have those moments? Hopefully, they're just moments, fleeting moments in our life, and they're not, consuming us, because that's called depression. Everyone is a little sad and is feeling a little despair. That's just part of life, and that's natural. But when one is engulfed repeatedly, you can't get it out of your mind. That's called depression. So Arjuna was experiencing this despair. And that first instruction that Krishna gives him, when Arjuna expresses his desire to hear a remedy for his desperation, then Krishna gives him that first instruction. So we should take that into heart, and we should try to understand it, reflect upon it. In the Vedic literatures, there's 4 items to education. The first item is to hear. I was saying when I was in college that there were some classes I really loved, and I would listen to the professor. And there's some classes I actually did not care for at all, and I did not listen. So what is the result of that? The ones where you enthusiastically hear, embrace, there's a lot of knowledge that goes in. And those that you resist or don't have much interest in, then hardly anything seeps in. So the whole thing with Bhagavad Gita is to create the proper internal environment. And that is an enthusiasm to hear, a recognition that I am not happy with the suffering condition, and I would like to become free from that suffering condition. And the way I can become free from that suffering condition is to understand my true nature, the true nature of the self. That is the sum and substance of yoga. The sum and substance of yoga is to understand our true nature and to live in that true nature, to experience that true nature. And the end result is Brahmabhuta Prasanatma, na sochati na kankshati. That when we're in that situation, when we're living in the reality of our existence as eternal entities, then Brahmabhuta Prasanatma, that's the Brahmabhuta stage. Na sochati na kankshati. That means there is no distress, there is no depression, that we are living in a stable, steady, happy, internal environment. All kinds of things may happen beyond our control externally, but what we can control is our mind. And if we don't control our mind, that's when everything is exacerbated. Everything becomes grandiose. It's what's in the mind. We do not see things as they are, says the great sages. We see things as we are. So if we are internally in the mind turbulent, depressed, miserable, then we look out at the world through those eyes, through those filters. So therefore, Krishna gives us yoga so that we can internally develop this stability, this living in the reality of the true nature, the eternal, blissful, fully cognizant nature of the self. So Even we have these bodies, old bodies, young bodies, middle-aged bodies, white bodies, black bodies, yellow bodies, red bodies, etc. We can live in the reality of the true nature of the self. And that reality is Sat Chit Ananda, or eternity, knowledge, and bliss. That is the reality of the soul. And that reality is with us all the time. And if we're not experiencing it, simply because we're covered. So Krishna and Arjuna have this dialogue to free us from that covering. We become free from that covering. And slowly by slowly, it doesn't happen all of a sudden. Don't expect, quick fix like going to a pharmacy. But it does gradually develop as we lend ourselves to the hearing process. Vedic paradigm for education is hearing and then reflecting on what we've heard. So this evening, we'll hear some instructions that Krishna is giving in Bhagavad Gita. Our duty then, after class, is to reflect on what we've heard. Even if it's only one thing that you latch onto that I've said, if it's only one thing, then reflect upon what it is. See how you can understand it, that particular point that Krishna is making. And if you can't understand it, then that's fuel for a question. You can email me or text me any question that you might have, and we can have a dialogue, or here, right on our class here, we can have this dialogue where any questions that may come to mind, you can ask. So hearing, reflection, very important. What's the third step of the Vedic paradigm for education? Assimilation. Then you take it and you try to absorb it into your life. And then ultimately, the fourth step is sharing. When you have something good, the tendency is to want to share it with others, isn't it? If you just read an article or you've had some revelation, the tendency is you want to share it with others. So according to the Vedic paradigm of education, you hear, you reflect, you try to incorporate it within your life, and then if there's any realization that you've had as a result of doing those first three things, you share it with others. What does that do? It sparks more and greater desire to hear. So the studying of the Gita or any other sacred text becomes part of your daily regimen because you have that desire, you have that inspiration. Okay, so we'll continue with Bhagavad Gita, 9th chapter, very important chapter. And right now, Krishna is describing to Arjuna, very practical ways that we can meditate upon and connect to our relationship with the Supreme. So I believe I left off, Eleanor, do you have where we left off, or were you not present last week? I can't remember.
Yeah, 22.
22. Thank you so much. So Krishna has given us ways that we can connect to the Supreme. I give heat and send forth the rain. I am immortality. I am death personified, etc., etc. Krishna has given a whole list of ways that we can practically connect to the Supreme. So text 22 in this chapter that Prabhupada has described as the most confidential knowledge. But those who always worship me with exclusive devotion, meditating on my transcendental form, to them I carry what they lack and I preserve what they have. So hearing Krishna is saying, connecting to the divine, supreme form of God is the highest, is the most intimate. And as a result of that connection, what does he say here? To them, I carry what they lack, and I preserve what they have. So what is that carrying what we lack? What does that mean? Carrying what we lack means that you may not have the strength, to deal with a particular situation. But simply the petition to the Supreme to do so can endow you with that strength. I think I've told this story before, but my sister, without going into too much detail, my sister, who's had much tragedy in her life, beyond belief, to this day, she's my older sister, to this day is doing very nicely in life and her ability to cope with things in life. And when she's asked, how is it that you've gone through so much trauma that you are able to remain, steady and progressive in your life? And her answer, I've heard this again and again, and I love hearing it. She says, I asked God to give me the strength, and he did. Very simple, yet profound realization. And really, that's kind of the sum and substance of how we do connect to the Supreme. We create this conversation or this dialogue. And the results of creating that dialogue with the Supreme is that what we lack, he carries for us. He helps us. Were you ever in a situation where you had to move something or unload something from the car, and it was just a little too heavy for you? You knew that if you tried to lift it by yourself, you'd probably throw your back out of line. And then a friend comes over, like, say, Sid, comes over to my house, as he often does, and I say to Sid, hey, Sid, can you help me with this? So something that I might have been able to do or handle by myself, but yet might have overtaxed me. Then I have another set of hands, and easily we're able to move it. So similarly, Krishna says, I carry what you lack. So sometimes we need those extra hands, those extra eyes to help us. And it simply requires asking, petitioning, in a humble state of mind. And Krishna here says that you're always in connection with me through worship, through exclusive devotion. I carry what you lack and preserve what you have. Those good qualities, those strong qualities, and you all possess good qualities and aspects of strength. Some qualities you may have that I don't have, and vice versa. And that's what makes us all so beautifully unique. So those things are preserved when we start the linking process with the Supreme. Text 23. Those who are devotees of other gods and who worship them with faith actually worship only me, O son of Kunti, but they do so in a wrong way. Here, Krishna is referring to the worship of demigods. Sometimes people mistakenly think that Bhagavad Gita or Hinduism promotes polytheism, whereas in reality, the Gita promotes or reveals that there is one God. He may manifest differently according to your desire, as Krishna says in the 4th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, as you approach me, as you surrender to me, I reward accordingly. So if you want a relationship, you want to be linked up with the Supreme, then that can be rewarded to you. That relationship can begin to develop. So many things are moved in a very mystical way in your life to set you on your path. But sometimes people want pleasure only for themselves. Now, according to the Vedas, there is a section of the Vedas that if you follow certain rules and regulations and rituals, you can receive a higher level of gratification, sense gratification. So, according to the understanding in the Vedas, there are within the human species, 400,000 species of human life. Within that, the highest levels of human species are called the demigods, like Surya, the sun god, Chandra, the moon god, Vayu, the wind god, Varuna, the god of water, Indra, the king of the demigods, etc., all these different gods, so to speak. But they're not in relationship to the Vedas. They are not God with a capital G. They're God with a small g. In other words, they have certain abilities, certain mystic powers, and certain universal responsibilities. Like Surya is in charge of the sun, Chandra is in charge of the moon, Varuna is in charge of the water. So these are just like the president of the United States has a cabinet. He's the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of State, the Secretary of Agriculture, Secretary of Transportation. He has a cabinet. He doesn't personally oversee the workings of transportation or the workings of defense or the workings of agriculture. In that way, he has a representative who takes that responsibility. And that representative who takes that responsibility is of this dimension of humanity or of beings called the demigod. So they're very powerful. They have a longer duration of life, and they have, to a greater degree, they have mystic powers, and they're able to assume responsibility on behalf of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So what Krishna is saying here in the 9th chapter, text 23, those who are devotees of other gods, like some worship Surya for health, or Chandra for a peaceful mind, or different demigods can bestow different kinds of benedictions or blessings, and who worship them with faith, because the principle is in humanity, we all have faith, but where to repose that faith? That is the principle. One can say, I have no faith, but they do have faith. They have faith in their intellect, their own intelligence, or their mind, whatever the mind says. They have faith that when they jump out of bed in the morning, the floor will be there. Now we do have faith intrinsic within us. But Krishna is directing, he's saying, where you repose that faith, then there'll be a result. So he's saying here, if you're reposing that faith in these higher beings called demigods, and you can look at all cultures, Mayan culture, Egyptian culture, Aztec culture, Inca culture, African culture, all the way through Persian, all the way through humanity, you see that there is a similar alignment of beings who are fitting the role of what Krishna is talking about here, the demigods. Just think of, I know when I was younger, I was in high school, I really liked Greek mythology. You have Greek and Roman mythology, but when you look at the parallels between Roman mythology, Greek mythology, Egyptian, and the Hindu paradigm of demigods, you see that there are a great deal of similarities that are contained within these cultures. Again, because this knowledge has been transmitted from a higher, and therefore Doesn't matter the culture. If there's any degree of civilization, there is usually an organized method of attaining what you want in life. If it's high degree of sense gratification, then you see there's rituals that have you worship certain personalities that can give you blessings or benedictions. But yoga, I like this definition of yoga because it kind of outlines it's a system or discipline that affords humanity the opportunity to realize its highest or its ultimate goal or desire. So if our ultimate desire is just a high degree of gratification, then we put into contact with this method of meditation or ritual. But ultimately, the highest thing that we can achieve is pure love of God, according to Bhagavad Gita. So if, in terms of Bhagavad Gita, if we utilize our human energy in the system of yoga, which means the linking up system to the Supreme, and to cultivate that relationship with the Supreme, then the highest thing that we can gain out of that endeavor, that yogic endeavor, is cultivating a pure love relationship with the Supreme. Because when one is in love, when one is experiencing the love emotion, and love is both noun and verb, there's the emotion love, and then there's the result of being in love, which is service. So when Krishna is saying here, devotion or devote yourself in this way, then that means that devotion is actually the ingredient, the necessary ingredient for the linking up process. Text 24, Krishna says, I am the only enjoyer and master of all sacrifices. Therefore, those who do not recognize my true transcendental nature fall down. 25. And what fall down means is we're overcome by desires. Desires which are material by nature and keep us shackled to this material world. We succumb to the desires. That's why two of my favorite verses appear back to back in the second chapter. Dhyayato vishayang pumsas sangastishu bhajayate sangat sanjayate kama krodha vijayate krodha bhavati sangmohat smriti brahmad buddhi nasho buddhi nishat pranashati. And Krishna says in that particular psychological tracking, he says, what we contemplate, what do we contemplate? That which we contemplate on, we become attached to. So what is the yoga process? To give us a system of contemplation on the higher dimensions of our existence and reality, meaning the soul and the soul's primary object of worship, the Supreme Soul. Then we become, through that process, we become attached. And when we become attached to the Supreme, then we incorporate within our life a mood, we cultivate a mood of devotion to that Supreme. But similarly, if we simply contemplate objects of the senses, objects to acquire, money, position, fame, then we become attached to that. And what does Krishna say in that verse? What one contemplates, one becomes attached to. By attachment, increased desire for what you are attached to develops. That increased desire leads to frustration. Frustration leads to anger. Anger leads to bewilderment. Bewilderment leads to memory gets fuzzy, and we fall down. We falling down means that we retain our attachment to our body and our mind and our senses as the ultimate, the all in all of our existence. Which means we continue in the repeated cycle of birth and death called samsara. Krishna says, whoever takes birth, for them death is certain. For those that die, rebirth is certain again. So as long as we remain in samsara, the cycle of birth, death, rebirth again, as long as we continue to act under the laws of karma, for every action there's a reaction, then we have to continue within this cycle. Sometimes we may be in a very good situation. We may be born into a wealthy or educated family. We are blessed with good health, blessed with beauty, handsomeness, sometimes like that. But the realization or the understanding is that doesn't always happen. Because someone who is blessed maybe with money or aristocracy or beauty, etc., may fall into a very distracted life and perform actions which cause bad reactions in the next life. So this is the understanding. So therefore, Krishna recommends utilize the energy that you have. Even if you're coming to this realization, you may be in your 50s, your 60s, your 70s, whatever age bracket you are in, doesn't matter. That if we take to the process, the yogic process, seriously, incorporating it into our life, rapid advancement can be made. This is a guarantee. And particularly in bhakti yoga, the yoga of love and devotion, because that is a yoga of mercy or grace. In other words, we perform the activities ultimately as an offering to the Supreme, and there is reciprocation. So there's the yoga of grace. It is the yoga of reciprocation. It is the yoga of availability. When we practice in this way, rapid advancement can be at our fingertips. Text 25, those who worship the demigods will take birth among the demigods. Those who worship the ancestors go to the ancestors. Those who worship ghosts and spirit will take birth among such beings. And those who worship me will live with me. So here Krishna is saying, it's your choice, buddy. How you focus, your mind, how you cultivate your mind dictates or determines your destination. In the 8th chapter, Krishna says there, whatever one is thinking about at the time of death, that is where we go. So just imagine, do you ever take inventory of what you think about during the course of the day? In days of struggle, we're thinking about our struggle. Oh, I'm so sick. Oh, I have financial problems. Oh, I'm having relationship problems, etc., etc. We take inventory. So imagine, death comes to us at any moment. We're all in old age. Unlike the government we do not say that when you hit this particular year, then you're in old age. Because old age, according to the Vedas, means the time before death. And who can predict? Who knows? Very rare few. Most of us don't know. Most of us are not prepared. So what the kind of mindset that you are cultivating repeatedly, the path that you are beating out, Henry David Thoreau says that you cannot have a path through a field by traversing it once, but you must go that way many, many different times, and eventually you beat a path through the field. So what we're thinking about on a regular basis, that's the path that we are creating. That is the mindset that we are cultivating. And therefore, the yoga system, recognizing the mind needs to be controlled, and we have to not only control it, but learn how to focus it in a heartbeat, literally. So yoga means any yoga system, whether it's Hatha Yoga, Iyengar Yoga, Ashtanga Yoga, Kriya Yoga, any yoga system, Bhakti Yoga, means to cultivate a mindset that first and foremost controls the senses. And secondly, once the senses are in control, to be within the true nature of the self as spirit soul. And then we are doing what we're doing. We have a different reference point. That's what Gita is pointing out. We have a different reference point when we are cultivating the yogic mindset. Text 26. This is a very famous verse. If one offers me with love and devotion a leaf, a flower, a fruit, or water, I will accept it. We see that the demands for connecting with the Supreme are not great. Simple. Krishna is not greedy. He says, offer me with love and devotion a leaf as simple as a tulsi leaf, a flower. We're fortunate here in South Florida. We're able to grow a lot of flowers. Every day we offer flowers to Krishna. Fruit or water, I will accept it. So what he's saying herein is very simple, daily routine, connection routine. That's yoga. And it can be done in all aspects of our life. Prior to us eating, we can offer our fruit, water that we drink, leaves, all of these things we can offer. So these are really wonderful and simple methods of connection to the Supreme. 27. Whatever you do, whatever you eat, whatever you offer or give away, and whatever austerities you perform, do that, O son of Kunti, Arjuna, as an offering to me. Here's the secret of connection. You see whatever you do in relationship to the Supreme. Whatever you do, whatever you eat, whatever you may offer or give away, whatever austerities you perform, you see that as part of your cultivation of a mindset in relationship to the Supreme. We see that as our offering. So our life doesn't change. Doesn't mean we give up eating or we give up having a relationship with our significant other, but we just see we develop, we cultivate a perception, a perspective that is a connected perspective rather than a disconnected perspective. A connected perspective is yoga. The process of yoga is to give us a connected perspective to the Supreme. Text 28. In this way, you will be freed from bondage to work and its auspicious and inauspicious results, the law of karma. With your mind fixed on me and this principle of renunciation, you will be liberated and come to me. So what is the principle of renunciation? To attach ourselves to the Supreme, to connect ourselves to the Supreme. It's not giving things up artificially, because that doesn't last. So many people I've spoken to say, yeah, I used to be a vegetarian, I used to be a vegan, and I couldn't do it anymore. No, but when you do it as a connective aspect of your yoga to the Supreme, then it's not a question of it becoming difficult. It becomes easier. It becomes joyful. So this is the secret. 29. I envy no one, nor am I partial to anyone. I am equal to all. But whoever renders service unto me in devotion is a friend, is in me, and I am also a friend to him. So Krishna is saying, I'm not attached. But if you approach me, just like when you deal with people, don't you find whatever mood that you're in and whatever mood that you convey, you usually get a reciprocation? If you're patient, if you're kind, if you're understanding, if you're considerate. I've had instances where the person starts off dealing with me in a very harsh way, and then I try to maintain my equilibrium. I try to think, this is not directed towards me. This person may have had a very difficult day, or may have had a very difficult life, which is causing them to act in that way. It just happened to me recently. I forget where I was. I think I was buying something, and the salesperson was quite rude. And I didn't change. I didn't change my course of dealing with the person. I addressed him as sir. I did not infuse the tone of my voice with distress or anger. Just tried to keep stable like that. And then he kind of changed. He kind of smiled and had a change of heart. And I had a graphic realization at that point. Yeah, it's what I'm putting out. I'll get a reciprocation of kind. So Krishna is saying here, I'm not partial, but if you're approaching me with love, then certainly. If you're approaching me as a friend, certainly there'll be reciprocation. That's why Bhakti Yoga, the cultivation of love and devotion, is the yoga of reciprocation. What we put out to the Supreme, we receive in return. I think there was, what was the name of that system or that process or that trend that was going? Was it called The Secret? And I believe the whole summons. Eleanor, you know what that is? Is it called The Secret?
You mean Abraham and Hicks?
Say that again.
Abraham and Hicks?
Is it called the Secret?
I think so.
Yeah. Well, basically, I think what I gleaned from it is what you put out, you get in return. So that universal principle, that principle there is kind of an impersonal principle. You put out to the universe. What is the universe? A bunch of planets in the sky. From the Bhakti tradition, what you put out to the Supreme, there's reciprocation. That is the secret. That is the secret that the Gita is sharing with us. 30. Even if one commits the most abominable action, if he's engaged in devotional service, he is to be considered saintly because he's properly situated in his determination. One of the most cryptic verses to understand, because one may interpret this verse as, you mean if I'm just like a horrible person, but yet I'm chanting or I'm doing service to God, then everything's okay. I'm cool. But what Krishna is referring to here is if in the course of your life you accidentally make some mistake, and that mistake, from the perspective of sattvic living, sattvic lifestyle, or pseudo-sattvic lifestyle, it seems to be totally inappropriate. But yet you're able to continue. You plow through the difficult times. You plow through it, and you still maintain an element of devotion and devotional service to the Supreme. That you can eventually transcend that condition, your fallen condition. 31, he quickly becomes righteous. See, Krishna says, quickly there's rectification and attains lasting peace. O son of Kunti, declare it boldly that my devotee never perishes. As long as you retain a heart filled with devotion, doing all that you do, all that you offer, all that you give away, all performances of austerities, as long as you continue with that, then there is always reciprocation and there is always help that's there. No matter how difficult life's road, life's path, and how severe a turn or transition it takes. 32. O son of Pritha, those who take shelter in me, though they be of lower birth, women, Vaishyas, Sudras. In this age, the Sanskrit word is Kalaus Sudra Sambhava. And everyone, because it is not a very hospitable time, a hospitable environment for spirituality, everyone who actually acts upon their lower nature, it doesn't matter. They can transcend that lower nature and attain the supreme destination. 33. How much more this is so of the righteous Brahmins, the devotees, and the saintly kings. Therefore, having come to this temporary miserable world, engage in loving service to me. So it's easier for those who cultivate a sattvic lifestyle, granted. But even if one is not in a suitable environment, but makes the determination that I'm going to use these years of my life in service to the Supreme, everyone has access. Every saint has a past, every sinner has a future. And then I think this is the concluding verse of chapter 9, and it's quite often quoted. Engage your mind always in thinking of me. Become my devotee. Offer obeisance to me and worship me. Being completely absorbed in me, surely you will come to me. So herein Krishna concludes the chapter by saying, and I reiterate that verse that I quoted from the second chapter, that if you can cultivate a mindset which is a meditation on your true spiritual nature as soul, and the true dharma of the soul is by meditating on the Supreme, then certainly the cultivation of such a mindset will end in the ability to always remember in any and all circumstances one's direct relationship with the Supreme. So that's how Krishna ends the 9th chapter. Next class, next week, we'll begin the 10th chapter. So the 9th and the 10th chapter, and particularly in the 10th chapter, texts 8, 9, and 10, I believe, are kind of like the heart of the Gita. So if you would like a little homework, I would read at least half or more of the 10th chapter to familiarize yourself with the verses that we'll go over. And, if anything rings a bell for you or any question that comes up, you can jot it down and we'll discuss. So I'll end the class here, the discussion here, and open the floor for any and all questions, observations, realizations, etc. Be happy to have some discussion in that regard.
I have a question, Laksmi.
Okay, Sid, shoot.
Okay, so, like the bulk of what we spoke about tonight, I mean, what is the relationship between, the word seva never came up. Is what we're reading here, is it our devotion to Krishna or to humanity by performing seva?
Okay. In what we read, if you're referring specifically to what we read this evening, Krishna mentions that we have to perform service. He says that what is our motivation? What is our intent in performing service? If our intent is to, there's different levels of intent. Yes, you can perform seva to humanity. Certainly, there are great personalities within our history that performed service to humanity. Krishna also mentions service to the higher beings, the demigods. But Krishna concludes by saying the greatest service that you can do is service to the Supreme, service to me, service to Krishna. And why is that? Because the metaphor that's used in the Srimad Bhagavatam is that service to the Supreme is like watering the root of the tree. Because all of us are connected. We're all parts and parcels of the Supreme. We're all tiny bits of Brahman. Qualitatively, eternity, knowledge, and bliss. Our characteristics are eternity, knowledge, and bliss. We're all connected. That by watering the root of the tree, which is the Supreme Himself, then the whole tree benefits. Therefore, my teacher, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, emphasized service to humanity by performing seva to the Supreme, because by doing so, en masse, that's called sankirtan, that's called together. We perform this. It's a very powerful and noticeable force to the Supreme. And by doing so, every living entity benefits. When yajna, Sanskrit word for sacrifice, is performed, then everything, in times, according to the Vedas, in previous times, when yajna was daily performed by most of the population, everything was aligned properly, including the weather and the government, all the things that we're having so much difficulty with now. Government's giving us problems. Climate change is there. Record number of days in extreme heat, and now we're having forest fires. We're being sandwiched into forest fires from Canada, forest fires from California, and that, practically speaking, when you take into account that the whole nation has been covered in smoke and ashes. So, these kinds of things, according to the Vedas, do not happen when there is proper sacrifice being performed. And they do happen in abundance when there is a lack of sacrifice being performed. So seva is part service. Seva literally means service to the Supreme Lord. When there is an abundance of seva or service, there is a reciprocation, not only within one's own heart, but within the hearts of others. And even it affects climate, and it affects, whether there's peace and stability in the world, whether there is disease or health. All of these things become affected by either the performance of seva to the Supreme or the lack of performance of seva to the Supreme. That is what is meant by reciprocation. As you put forth, if you put forth discord, disharmony, violence, it breeds an atmosphere of discord and violence.
Mhm.
Very simple. Very, very simple formula. Does that answer your question or address your question?
Partially. Let me ask you this. So when we go to do Harinam,
Mhm.
that is to Krishna or to the people that are watching, the witnesses of Harinam?
Both. Both. It's for the pleasure of Krishna, and it's for the benefit of all living entities, not just the people.
Mm-hmm.
The trees, the grass, the dogs, the cats. It has universal application to every soul, because every soul is part and parcel of the Supreme. So when you go out, for those that don't know what Harinam is, Nam means name, and Hari means the name, one of the names of God. And in the Krishna tradition, in the Krishna Bhakti tradition, especially in contemporary times, one of the sacrifices that is performed is we go out into the public and we chant. And the chanting always affects your own heart. But the chanting has the potency to affect the hearts of others, as I said, in any species. And that chanting done in the proper mood and proper intention pleases Krishna. So here is a universal sacrifice that can be simply and regularly performed, and it will have that kind of benefit, that profound impact on one's own heart. Remember, I said the paradigm for Vedic knowledge or education is the fourth is sharing. So that principle of sharing is a very important aspect of our execution of our yoga process.
Wow, thank you, Lakshmi.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you, Sid. Nice question. Anyone else? Eleanor, you look like you're poised.
Travel in my mind about seva being renunciation of the fruits. So if you are so devoted and doing everything for Krishna, is there some expectation there or not?
The highest level of consciousness is there's no expectation. It's like the person who helps another because it makes them feel good. There's a person who does good so others recognize them. And there's a person who does good because that's their nature. So in the execution of devotion, it depends on the level of consciousness that is cultivated. It depends on the intent. There should be no expectation. No, I'm not doing this for any kind of recognition. Oh, what a great person Lakshmi is. Look at all the devotion that he has and he's doing. No, not to seek that. Lord Chaitanya, he only wrote 8 prayers or 8 verses called the Shikshashtakam. And he gives the formula for how to cultivate a mindset that would always be connecting to the Supreme through chanting. Trinadapi sunichena, tarodapi sahishnana, amanida manadena, kirtanaya sadahari. So, humble state of mind. Not feigned humility, but genuine humility, to cultivate a humble state of mind, which means recognizing the greatness of God. When we have that understanding, the greatness of God, then it's easy to be humble. Then, Trinadapi sunichena, humility, tarodapi sahishnana, tolerance. Krishna says that in the Gita. If you remember in the 2nd chapter, I believe it was the 14th verse. Matra sparshas tukontiya sitoshna sukadukada agama payano nityas tang tutikshashva bharata. Cultivating the mindset of tolerance, tolerating heat and cold, the changing seasons, happiness, distress, etc. This cultivation of tolerance helps us to advance spiritually. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, in this particular verse, and how to be able to constantly connect with the Supreme through chanting, says that humility, tolerance. Then amanida manadena. Amanida means you don't look for recognition. You're not doing it. You're not serving God, seva, for fame, adoration, or distinction. You're simply doing it because it is our intrinsic nature to serve. And if we don't serve God, we will serve government, we will serve our partner, we will serve humanity, we will serve the dog or the cat, having these rescue places, with some way. And I just got a dog not too long ago, a couple of months ago, from Good Karma Dog Rescue, Pet Rescue, I'm sorry. And I am so impressed with the people that work there, because you see, they have an instinct to help. Everyone who works there, from the manager, Bridget, to Vita, to Ray, to, what's her name? Jill, all the different people that I've met there, they have an instinct, a kindness, a compassionate heart. That is our nature. And it doesn't mean you can't do Good Karma Pet Rescue or helping the poor or helping the diseased like Mother Teresa did. But what it means is that you utilize that that kindness and that and also in service to God. That's our true nature. Did I answer your question? Yes, Eleanor? Okay. Anyone else? Celia, do you have any thoughts going? I know you're always thinking about these subject matters. You have anything you'd like to share with us, or any question you'd like to ask? No pressure, only if you have it. Irina, you have anything you'd like to share with us or say? Gokula, anything? Jai Krishna? Okay, if not, no pressure. This is discussion. If you would like to say something or share something, that's entirely up to you. So thank you again. Hopefully next week my hoarse voice will go away. I am trying to not talk as much. This is really the first time I was talking all day today, trying to give my voice a rest. We had a great time at Gita Nagari Eco Farm. If you happen to be near Harrisburg, it's maybe an hour outside of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, in Port Royal, Pennsylvania. It's a beautiful project, just done by a handful of devotees who are dedicated to the principle of simple living and higher thinking. They have 92 cows there that they are taking care of. Around 20 of them are milk producing, so they have abundance of milk and cheese and other products that they make there, called ahimsa milk. And they have so many clients in New Jersey and New York and Philadelphia and Baltimore that they are straining to keep up with the demand for ahimsa milk and milk products. But they do it with a smile. And my hat's off to Dhruva and Parijata, the husband and wife team that heads up that project. And it was a nice backdrop for the kids. There were 50 kids who attended that camp. And it was a wonderful camp where they did a lot of kids' activities like sports and kayaking and swimming. And there were a lot of very educational dimensions to the program. There was, classes on seva for the kids and how to do seva, how to do kirtan. And my son was Mr. Enthusiasm. He really loved being there. He was, I think, one of the youngest kids there in attendance. And he was a ball of enthusiasm. He took advantage of all the classes. There was collaborative art class, herbology class, and on and on. There was a lot of different. So in the morning they would do that kind of thing. Afternoon they would do the swimming and the sporting and the kayaking and all that. So it was wonderful. Tough on my knees. I realized that my knees are not up to. The doctor told me a year. And it's only been about 9 months, so it was tough on my knees, but now I'll just kind of chill out a little bit and, recuperate from 50 kids. So happy to be back with you all. I wish I could have broadcast from there, but the internet connection was not so stable, and that's very frustrating. So I just decided to, postpone it until this week. But I'm back for a while and loving and longing for your association. So next week will be August 9th at 7 p.m. and we'll further discuss. We'll move into chapter 10. So if you get an opportunity, read into chapter 10, make any notes if you can, and we'll continue our Gita discussion next week. Until that time, you all please have a happy, healthy, and holy week ahead of you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Laksmi.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.